one of the most successful and popular Maven instructor. Your course is $900, and you have another executive course that is $2,500. So anything you share is actually highly valuable, and probably people need to pay money to listen to this. And before you were doing this Maven course, you were Amazon VP, leading, I believe, more than 800 people, and you wrote a sentence, very important sentence in the Amazon leadership principle.
All of those things are true. Yeah. Some things about work, of course, change with time. Some things will never change. Meaning, as long as we're still working with people, human nature hasn't changed. Some technical experts are building monuments to their own expertise. They're focused on, is this an elegant algorithm? Am I solving the hardest problem? Am I using the newest technology? But that doesn't actually necessarily help the business progress.
All right. So I sent you the agenda, but I think this is how I think can be most helpful to the audience of my channel. There are two challenges that I sense a lot of people face. First, are the experiences we hear from successful leaders like you are still relevant in today's age? Especially, there are less opportunities in the tech industry. It's growing slower. That's the perception. So, people feel, okay, I hear a lot from gurus or executive coach that speak to their experience, but not necessarily to my experience, because there are so much fewer opportunities. So that is kind of problem number one. And problem number two is many people do not enjoy their work. I feel the sense is like, I guess a little bit about myself. I graduated 2017 from Cornell as an econ PhD, and then joined Amazon for 2 years. So 2017 to 2019 as an economist, and then moved to Meta as a data scientist for 2 years. Went back to China, joined Tencent Games for 2 years, vice director for data science, and managed 30 people. But I shared this feeling with many people that before the pandemic, before 2019 especially, people like to enjoy their work. And the morale, the vibe is pretty good. Office is a place that energizes you. But after pandemic, especially with hybrid working and the slowdown, the layoffs, many people start to feel stuck in their work and do not enjoy going to work anymore. So that's kind of the two overarching problem. And I know you must have so many experiences in this. I don't know if we should do a quick introduction. If I should do a quick introduction about you, and then you can.
Yeah, it's up to you. I mean, I love those topics. I'm happy to talk about them. I do have strong opinions about them. As for an introduction, that's for what you feel helps your channel most.
So I knew you through Maven and LinkedIn, and you are one of the most successful and popular Maven instructor. So, and your course is, I believe, is $900, and you have another executive course that is $2,500. So anything you share is actually highly valuable, and probably people need to pay money to listen to this. And before you were doing this Maven course, you were Amazon VP, leading, I believe, more than 800 people, and you wrote a sentence, very important sentence in the Amazon leadership principle.
All of those things are true. Yeah, I worked 15 years at Amazon from 2005 to 2020. Probably best known there for helping start Prime Video and then also helping start Prime Gaming. And I spent 12 years in startups before that, though. So I also have startup experience, albeit kind of one generation back. And now I work for myself, teaching others what I learned.
Cool. Yeah, we have learnings from successful people, but do those learnings still apply to today's working environment or today's challenges?
Yeah, so that's, of course, a hugely broad question. And after I say a little bit about it, if you want to specialize or follow up, I invite you to. Yep. But some things about work, of course, change with time. Some things will never change. Meaning, as long as we're still working with people, human nature hasn't changed. A lot of things about how to work well with people, maybe now called emotional intelligence, I find you can find references to them in, the ancient wisdom of any of the great world religions, for example. So I often will find myself quoting, long dead scholars on how to interact with people. So something as an example, since you talk about a Chinese audience, that comes, I believe, from Lao Tzu, is the master does the non-doing and everything falls into place. There is a lesson to be drawn today still from that. And of course, people also focus on like learnings from the art of war and other, ancient masters of how things work. So I think human interaction, there's plenty to be learned, not just from leaders my age who are still alive, but also from historical leaders. If anything has changed. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was saying, so the tactics change, but the wisdom is the same wisdom, but people need to learn the wisdom.
You need to figure out how to apply those. So, for example, obviously, most of those leaders, any place in the world, grew up in a time of face-to-face communication. Now we have hybrid, distributed workforces. That's a little bit different. And so you have to think about how do you apply this wisdom maybe in a hybrid environment. Obviously, if we think of Sun Tzu, who wrote Art of War, he wasn't thinking about time zones, right? He didn't have this like follow the sun model, so we have some new problems. But to answer your fundamental root question, I don't think building relationships and coordinating groups of people has fundamentally changed. The challenge of organizing a group of people to get something done remains largely similar. Definitely some of the tools and tactics need to evolve.
That's very interesting, not because, what's changed, what's not changed, but because what you think the crux of the problem is, you summarize as, managing a relationship and coordinating people. But when I think about this, I was like, especially trying to emphasize with a lot of IC or land managers, like staff level IC, senior level IC,
Mm-hmm.
they would think there are not many promotion opportunities. So they don't think about this people, or they don't think people is the important part. As long as I do the job well, or I have a high scope project, or I have, a certain domain, I have certain opportunities, I get promoted. But seems like you feel the other part is the more important aspect of this.
Well, it's not surprising because I went into personnel leadership very early. I did, once I left graduate school, I was an IC for less than 1 year before going into management for the rest of my career. So it's not surprising I emphasize that. But one thing I find ICs make a mistake. There are limited promotion opportunities, but there are not none. And ICs make a mistake, which is they think that hard work and technical expertise are the only things required. And in fact, the people making decisions about promotions and who gets those opportunities, usually, number one, there's a lot of people who have at least technical competence, meaning several people may be good technically or with their skills or have a good scope project. So having a little bit better skill may not be enough to set you apart versus having a good working relationship with the manager, having shown that you can add value, not just by your technical skill, but by your ability to relate that technical skill to business value, makes a big difference. Because as an engineer, and as someone who led a lot of engineers, Some technical experts are building monuments to their own expertise. They're focused on, is this an elegant algorithm? Am I solving the hardest problem? Am I using the newest technology? But that doesn't actually necessarily help the business progress. In other words, a working hack and an elegant algorithm may have the same business value. Some people are stuck in the mindset, but I've done better work if I came up with an elegant algorithm. Well, maybe, but it's not necessarily going to be tied to promotion. So even for ICs, I often coach ICs that to move up, you need to think beyond personal technical performance or even scope of the project, because so much of it is trust, relationship, and ability to relate your technology to business value.
Yeah, and there are other guests on my channel that spoke the same message, but I find like people, like there are, of course, people start paying attention, but it's hard to do for some reason, or maybe it's uncomfortable to do. So like you raise the awareness that you need to pay attention to the business value, you need to pay attention to connections, relationship, but then there's no textbook, there is no right or wrong. Like if you have an elegant algorithm, you know it's elegant, the code is there, but then and do other things, you enter the domain of uncertainty. I think the uncertainty is the painful part. Is there a way to help you guide through the uncertainty and kind of have at least a feedback loop of knowing, am I doing right or wrong? Because there are so many factors can.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer your question, but with a little bit of background first. I think our school system creates some of the behavior, because if you think about everyone began in school, and school has like very clear assignments and you get grades on them, and you're taught that there's a right and wrong and higher marks are better. And all of that encourages a push towards the sort of measurable scientific or pseudoscientific, but the firmly measured. And we get good at that.
Explicit.
Everyone at a top company has gone to a good school and they've worked hard to get top marks. So they're very skilled at that, because actually they started training and doing it maybe as young as 5, but definitely at 10 years old, 12 years old, 15 years old, and they have years of training. When you move to this fuzzy domain, they have no training. And it's very uncomfortable, because it may be uncomfortable for their personality, but it's also unfamiliar. So then your question is, how do you persist in doing it? Or maybe how do you measure it? I don't know if there's a good way to like convert relationship to a measurement. But you've asked a really good question. How do you take this fuzzy area and know how you're doing? And the feedback signals are very soft. The feedback signals come informally of someone telling you that was helpful, or that's a good idea, or could you advise us on this project? One of the ways I have said that senior ICs can know they're influential is, when is their opinion being sought out when it's not their project? In other words, is someone coming to ask you about your, ask for your opinion when it's not your work? That's a huge sign of influence, is we'd like your advice because you're a good advisor. Now, how do you get there? That's a different question. But if you're being asked to give your input on things outside your direct work, the more you're being asked to do that, the more you've succeeded in being influential and valuable to the business.